Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. One of the most despised terms in modern storytelling is formula. It is a word that inspires thoughts of stale, repetitive, prepackaged, and uninspired stories. It makes people think that they are going to be hearing stories about the same people doing the same things with a slightly different coat of paint every single time. I think that's a completely unfair assessment. In point of fact, formula is one of the most powerful tools a good storyteller has at their disposal. What I think the problem is that a lot of people can't actually see that because they don't know what formulas underpin the stories they know and love. The most extreme example of this I can think of actually comes out of the tabletop role-playing community. As soon as you go online and you look up to learn anything about this particular hobby, you will discover there is a small but very vocal portion of the player base that hates the idea of coming into the game with some idea of story already in play. They want people to sit down, roll some dice, win some fights, lose some fights, grab some treasure, and then look back on it and see the story that they created rather than sitting down with an idea of what the beats of a story are already going to be. I think it's very interesting because, while there are a lot of different games that tackle this basic idea, one of the more popular ones is called Adventurer, Conqueror, King. And the name of that game is a character arc. Furthermore, if you look through the rules of the game, you find that when you sit down to play it, you will be sitting down to play a character who begins as a poor adventurer, builds up a certain amount of reputation and wealth, and founds their own kingdom. That is the entire point of the game, and that is a character arc. It is so deeply buried in the game that apparently most people cannot even see that it is there. And yet, they will tell you that it can't be a character arc because every character that goes through the game comes out different. They experience different things, they experience talking to different characters, the roles come out different, and so they win and lose different battles, and the person playing them makes different decisions. And that's all true, but it doesn't change the fact that there is a predetermined character arc and formula that they are following. That arc being Adventurer, Conqueror, King. The game system is so interesting to them because it focuses on the formula, on the character arc it wants to deliver, and then it gives the people looking for that story arc infinite room to play around with it. You can have different types of characters, you can have different types of environments, you can have different types of antagonists and obstacles and natural disasters. There is room for infinite creativity within this one plot structure. And that, I think, is what people can't see when they look at formula and they say it sucks. Most likely they are not rebelling against formula, they are either rebelling against formula poorly executed, or they are simply laboring under a formula that is a poor fit for the actual story they want to tell. The mechanics of Adventurer, Conqueror, King are a very poor fit for a gang of thieves running a heist on a highly secured vault. A game that provides mechanics suited to that is Blades in the Dark, and it is entirely different from Adventurer, Conqueror, King because the story that is baked into the rules of the game is entirely different. Both have a basic character arc in mind, and they have mechanics built around that, but they are so deeply buried in the lore and rules of the game, most people simply don't see it there. Any game designer that is worth their salt recognizes that fact, and they set out to marry up the basic story arc of their game to the mechanics of the game. They set out to encourage people to play the kinds of characters that fit in their game, and they discourage people from playing in other ways, usually by taking away rewards from those other styles of play. In the original version of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax set out to encourage people to play as scoundrels who were robbing dungeons in order to build up their own careers and reputations. As such, he made sure that you progressed by collecting money from the places you explored. You did not progress by fighting monsters or disarming traps or just traveling long distances. You had to get money. Your character's story was therefore already predetermined for you to a certain extent. Likewise, in the mystery investigation game Call of Cthulhu, your character gets better when they use their skills in particularly effective or particularly disastrous ways. As such, there's a pretty strong incentive for them to go out and tinker with forces beyond their understanding, so that they can become better characters or drive themselves insane. I mean, sometimes those are the breaks. Each of these basic systems plays around with the ideas and concepts of the stories in order to bring them to the players in effective ways. How effective they are can be argued, has been argued ad nauseum. It's not my intention to do that here. Rather, my intention is to draw the parallel between the game designer and the storyteller. The game designer wants to create a set of tools that encourages players to tell a certain kind of story, be it clever thief or conquering adventurer. The storyteller, in whatever medium he may work in, be it prose, images, or music, is trying to evoke a response from the reader, ideally one that harmonizes with the characters they are reading about or whose stories they are otherwise experiencing. Now, it may seem like the storyteller has more tools in their toolbox to understand the stories they are trying to tell. Right off the bat, they intuitively understand they are trying to tell a story, unlike some of the people who talk about tabletop role-playing games, for example. Furthermore, they have genre conventions and tropes and writing manuals to work off of that will theoretically give them a stronger command of formula. But ultimately, I find that many storytellers don't really think beyond the formula. They know there is a structure or perhaps some rules they should follow, but they don't really understand what those rules are supposed to do. The mechanics in all three games I mentioned before strongly encourage players to behave in certain ways so that the characters they are playing become more effective in the game world. The people who designed them understood what each of those mechanics would do and why they wanted to put it in their game. But many people who tell stories do not understand what genres or tropes do and why they may wish to put them in their stories. They simply know that the stories they enjoy use these tropes and these genres, and so they kind of throw them all together. And when they combine them, they simply throw them together in the ways they originally saw them. That results in one of two things. The first thing it can result in is an uninspired paint-by-number story that is exactly like dozens of other stories that already exist. This, I think, is why storytellers hate formula so much. People play it entirely safe with a story formula they don't understand, and so they cannot do anything new or interesting with it. It is not really their story. It is just a cookie-cutter stamp of someone else's story. Unlike the formula of Adventurer, Conqueror, King, there is no variability, there's no randomness, there is no different decisions due to different characters. There is just a repeat of a formula. And that's pretty dull. I'm not going to lie. But the problem for that does not lie at the feet of the formula, it lies at the feet of the storyteller. The other possibility is that people take a whole bunch of different pieces from other stories and they throw them all together without bothering to harmonize them. You get a bunch of systems that don't play well together. It's hard to extend our TTRPG analogy into this case study, not because there's no examples of it, but because they are so weird and arcane and obscure that we could be here for hours discussing people who just did not understand what RPG mechanics were doing when they threw them all together in the same rulebook. But that really doesn't help us understand what the storyteller needs to do, so we'll take a pass on that. If you are going to combine a ton of formulas or a ton of tropes, you actually have an even greater obligation to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Because if you are trying to harmonize your audience with your characters, you're going to have to make sure your characters are in harmony with each other and the world around them first. If you just throw a whole bunch of tropes together and don't understand them, you're going to wind up with a very discordant cast or a very discordant plot. And that is going to keep the audience from ever harmonizing with them. Ultimately, what I have found as I partake of stories is that the people who really are masters of the craft are people who are very comfortable with tropes and with formulas, but who understand them to the extent where they can exploit the infinite variety possible within them because they know how each piece works. They can mix and match the concepts because the formula that underpins it all will help harmonize all those tropes and characters into a unified whole. And that is possible because they don't ignore the story below the surface. They see the story most people do not see. I myself have endeavored to throw a whole bunch of things into the pot, and what came out was a little short story and novella collection called Have Spell Will Travel. You can find that on Amazon right now. There's a link to it down in the description of this video. Let me know what you think of it if you've checked it out down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.